Good evening, everybody, and welcome. My name is Sabir, and I direct events here at the Strand. Before we launch into a discussion of While the Earth Sleeps, We Travel, I'd like to share a little bit of history about the Strand. The Strand was founded in 1927 by Benjamin Bass over on 4th Avenue's Book Row. Stretching from Union Square to Astor Place, Book Row gradually dwindled until, after over 93 years, the Strand is a sole survivor, now run by third generation owner Nancy Bass Wyden. We want to thank all of you for your support. Without our loyal community of book lovers, we wouldn't be here today, and we are so very appreciative of it. Tonight, we are thrilled to have with us Ahmed Badr to launch While the Earth Sleeps, We Travel. While the Earth Sleeps, We Travel is a diverse and moving collection of stories, poems, and artwork from displaced youth across the world. A meditation on the concept of home and a testament to the power of storytelling. This book pairs Ahmed's own personal poems and narratives with contributions from storytelling workshops for displaced youth in and outside refugee camps from around the world. Ahmed is a poet and social entrepreneur working to combine poetry, archival material, and multimedia to explore the complexities of migration, identity, and self expression, with a focus on reframing and reclaiming the power of tragedy. On July 25th, 2006, Ahmed's home in Baghdad was bombed by militia troops. He and his family relocated to Syria, where they lived as refugees for over 2 years before receiving approval to move to the United States. Ahmed has addressed the United Nations on more than 10 occasions, and his work has been recognized by National Public Radio, Instagram, BuzzFeed, and Global Citizen, among others. He has exhibited at Harvard University, the Juilliard School, UNICEF House, World Bank Headquarters, Christie's, and the Metropolitan Museum of Art. A recent graduate of Wesleyan University, he serves as one of 17 UN Young Leaders for Sustainable Development Goals in the Office of the UN Secretary General's Envoy on Youth. Joining him in conversation is actor, director, and UNHCR Goodwill Ambassador Ben Stiller. 10% of all proceeds tonight will be donated to UNHCR, so we want to thank all of you, our attendees, for your donations tonight. So, without further ado, please join me in welcoming Ahmed and Ben to the stage.
Hey there.
Oh my God, here we are. It's the virtual land, the virtual world, and here to celebrate this project. It's so good to see you, man. How's life? Where are you at?
It's good. I'm in New York, just outside New York City, and it's great to see you. Where are you?
I'm in Houston, so Houston, Texas. I feel like I got here, during spring break back in March, and then blinked, and now it's like 7, 8 months later.
Yeah. And are you back in school?
No, I graduated in May.
So you're done. You're totally done.
I'm done, so I'm officially an adult now. So in the course of this conversation, if you have any tips on how to be an adult in the world, please
you better figure out what you want to do with your life and get productive, because you're really slagging off, man. Look, it's great to see you, because the first time we met was I don't know, is it 4 years ago, something like that?
Something like that, yeah. For World Refugee Day, it was at the UN, yeah.
Yeah, and I actually write about it in the foreword to your book about our first meeting, and how incredibly impressed I was with you as a person, just in terms of how you presented yourself at this very serious UN event with the Secretary General there, and read this amazing poem about your experience as a kid and a young person going through the refugee experience. And I was so taken by the creativity that you expressed, the humor, the personal experience that you were putting out there in a way in this beautiful poem that really, I think, transcended what a lot of people maybe perceive when they think about what a refugee, quote unquote, is. And I think that's like a really important thing to be talking about, and what's so great about your book, which is called While the Earth Sleeps, We Travel, which everybody should get. Because it's an amazing piece. So first of all, congratulations on finishing it.
Thank you, Ben. Thank you. I really appreciate it.
Do you want to talk a little bit about what what the impetus was for the book, and then how you went about doing it?
Sure. Yeah. And again, thank you so much for joining us today and for writing that beautiful, beautiful foreword. I always laugh at the first line. The first time I met Ahmed, he made me very uncomfortable. And so folks have to read the rest of it to figure out why I made you uncomfortable. But again, yeah, it's such a pleasure to be able to bring this project to the world, and to just kind of present it and everyone in it. This is a collective project, right? It's not just me. There's so many different folks represented in it. About 27 different folks that I had the pleasure of meeting from 11 different countries. And so I think the idea for it was really, born out of this work over the last few years of trying to really, and you touched upon it a little bit already, is this idea of when we talk about refugee stories, what stories are we assuming? And then what narratives are we that come to mind immediately? And then are those narratives told by those individual people? Or are we hearing it through some other kind of medium, right? So through my own experience, starting in high school, I started writing about my own family story, and then moving to the US, and living in Syria, leaving Iraq, and then realized, okay, well, this exploration of trying to figure out what it meant to, be an Iraqi-American Muslim refugee, there were others that were also going through something similar, but also, it was so empowering to be able to share that story and to have people listen. And so from that experience, I started an organization that does this work through fellowships with displaced young people and publishing. But this work was really, and this project, when it started, I thought, okay, well, I want to go and meet folks that are like me, that have been resettled, but also that haven't, folks that are in camps, folks that, are just, trying to figure out, what's next. And so that's where the initial idea came, is that, okay, well, how do displaced young people want to represent themselves on the world stage? And what can I do to create spaces beyond just my own personal story for their stories to rise to the surface? And I wanted to see how we can create spaces where they can tell their own stories on their own terms. And so that was kind of the initial idea. And then, travel to Greece, travel to Trinidad and Tobago, and then, to New York, upstate New York and Syracuse and across the US as well, to meet with young people and ask them that question. How do you want to introduce yourself to the world? What medium do you want to introduce yourself to the world through? Do you want it to be a poem? Do you want it to be a story? Do you want it to be artwork? And so really it's that initial impetus of how do you want to introduce yourself to the world? Here's a project that lets you do that.
Yeah, and the result is this this really beautiful collection of poems and pieces of art, and stories that really humanize, what the term refugee is. I almost I don't like, how do you feel about that term? Because I find every time I say it, it feels in a certain way it's reductive. Do you feel that?
I think the issue is what's attached to it, not necessarily the word itself, right? It's when we think of refugee, we immediately think of war and violence and blood. And again, that's part of the story, but that can't be just the entire story, right? And so through, the stories, you'll see, it's not a book about displacement. It's a book about folks that happen to be displaced, sharing their stories in creative ways, or their perspectives. Not everyone in there is talking about how they left home, why they left home, and kind of the tragedy of that, even though, again, that's a key part of the story, but it's not all of it. So I agree with you. I think it is reductive at times, but I think it's that reductiveness is extended if we don't offer up different narratives that counter that kind of instinctual, oh, this person's a victim. Oh, this person, needs our help. And again, that might be the case, but it shouldn't always be, when we think of that word, we shouldn't always assume like so much distance between our experiences and of those that happen to be displaced.
Yeah. And I think that just from, what the little I've learned over the last few years, the experience of being displaced, and that journey that can go a lot of different ways. You're a great example of that. At a time where probably there was a time where you were, or your family was, more vulnerable. But then the progression of, and first of all, that the resiliency that anyone who goes through this experience has and the strength to come out the other side and to find a life, whether it's in a new place or back home, if that's possible. But the progression is to self-sufficiency and to a life that is not based on having to be helped. And I think that's another part of the experience that people aren't really necessarily that aware of, because when I talk about it for UNHCR, we're talking about helping people who are in these very, very dire situations, and that help is so needed. But the great thing is that these stories go somewhere and are about about surviving and about thriving. And I think that's what's really beautiful about the book, is that these are people who some of them are in Greece. You went to a camp there, or a displaced persons settlement community.
Yeah, so Greece both ways, in camps and then in urban context as well. Yeah.
Right, and a lot of the refugee communities in places that are close to the conflicts, where they, the neighboring countries that they come out of, sometimes people are, a lot of the time, are living in communities, not in camps. But you also talk to refugees settled in Syracuse and in different places, so in different stages of the journey. Can you talk a little bit about the people you met, the young people you met in these different places? And because some of the art is just amazing, and it's so striking. And like you said, it doesn't necessarily relate directly to the experience of being displaced. It's just beautiful art.
Absolutely. I think so it started in Greece. And initially, when I thought about the proposal of the book, I thought, I'm going to go to Greece, I'm going to go to Sweden, I'm going to go to Germany, I'm going to go to all these places. And then when I got to Greece, I realized, depth is more important here. I didn't need to go to 6, 7 countries. In this one country, there are people from all different parts of the world, that have been displaced and have been settled to Greece. So again, that's really, really unfortunate. But I thought, okay, well, this project, needs to be centered here so we can kind of start and meet with these communities. And again, a key part is that you have to meet folks where they're at, and both in terms of their own experiences and then just, their own expressions. And so, I ended up staying in Greece for almost 3 months and, working in one camp in particular, but then, I traveled to the islands and met with folks there, and lived in Athens. Yeah, go ahead.
When you went over there, did you know anybody there when you went over? Because I remember you telling me you were going to go do this book, and I was like, wow, that's great. This kid's just going to go off to Greece and meet with refugees and write a book. And like, how old were you when you were doing this?
Oh my God, I was it's like 19 going on 20 when it started. Right. Yeah.
What did your parents think?
Youth. Yeah.
Doing it?
Really yeah, that was 2 years ago. Yeah, sorry, go ahead, I cut you off.
No, I was saying, what did your parents think when you told them you were going to go do this?
They were, worried in the beginning, because they were like, okay, well, you have these kind of huge plans, these multiple countries, like, do you have a plan in place? And I think once they saw that I, had a plan or some kind of plan, I only knew like 2 people in Greece that were friends of friends that were, very embedded in the community and were incredibly helpful throughout that process, Neve and Jabran. And so, when I got there, I didn't want to set too high of expectations. I thought, okay, well, let's just, meet people and then see where it goes from there. But yeah, and UNHCR, I think I have to give them credit too. I got to connect with the office there through the amazing Melissa Fleming, and the office in Athens is wonderful. And they, were very, very supportive in connecting me with the different communities there. And really a key part of this too was recognizing my own kind of place there. Like what doesn't often happen is someone that was formerly displaced that comes back to a place where displacement is actually happening and does workshops or does kind of anything related to storytelling, usually it's either a journalist that has, is completely separated from the experience, or a multinational institution that's trying to tell a specific story. That was another key.
Or someone like me coming over and with a camera crew and and interviewing them, and which has its purpose because it's getting a message out. But that's what I think is so unique about what who you are and what you're doing. And I'm curious how they reacted when you would, because there was a commonality of experience. And maybe you could tell me about a couple of the people you met there.
Absolutely. So I'll never forget. I may have mentioned the story to you before, so forgive me, or just accurately surprised when I tell it.
Okay.
The first time there was a camp north of Athens that I ended up spending a lot of my time in, and the first time I got there, I was talking to the kind of the person who ran the space that I was about to work within, and she was from upstate New York, and we're talking like we're talking now. And then I remember like a Syrian gentleman came and was listening to a conversation, and then started speaking English with my boss at the time, basically, and me. And then all of a sudden I just like flipped it and started speaking like Iraqi-Arabic, like rapid Iraqi-Arabic to him. And there was this moment where it was like, wait, how can like those two things exist within one person? First it was like, who the hell is this guy? And then it was like, well, how does how can he speak Arabic with the Iraqi accent and then flip it and speak to to this person from upstate New York? So there was this moment there where it was, yeah, go ahead.
No, I'm saying that's pretty amazing. And what happened then? I mean, what was his reaction?
He was like, we just started laughing because he was like, well, what's and we ended up being really, really great friends afterwards. And I spent so much time in that camp doing workshops, and I'll never forget the first workshop there at that camp. We were in this tiny place. It was like a container, basically. I'm sure you've seen them in the trips. It's like a small kind of, think of like a big shipping container, that they put in ships, but like turned into a room. And we did the first workshop there, and there were maybe like 20, 30 people like squeezed in. And I was speaking in English, and then I translated to Arabic. And then my Arabic was translated into Kurmanji, which is a Kurdish dialect. And then my English was translated to French for the one Cameroonian guy in the back of the room. And so we did all of this, in the span of an hour and a half. But again, the folks were just so incredible, and were so generous, and just, being, so open with their own experiences, but also, just, recognize. And I also I made sure to recognize that my own experience is different from theirs. My family never spent time in a camp, luckily. So, we were very lucky, and were able to be resettled, and only 1% of everyone that is displaced gets resettled. And so I was really upfront with that, and then I'm not claiming to know exactly what you're going through, but I'm just here to offer up these tools, for storytelling. And if you'd like, please join and participate. And another key part about this too is that in that room there were anywhere from like 6-8-year-olds that have drawings featured in the book to 25, 26-year-olds who have poems and long form stories in there. So the age part too was really, really interesting. And so it was both just recognizing my own place coming in, and then being more comfortable with my own, also I was called like the American several times, and I'm just like, wow, I'm American here, I guess. I don't know. I'm Iraqi-American in the US. I don't know. So that's another key thing, is this project made me realize how just powerful it is to be multiple things at once, and to be able to create spaces within the Iraqi side and the American side for them to come together. And this project, it really would not have been possible without that duality.
Yeah. And you talk about creating space for these messages to come out, and for these voices to be heard. And again, like I'll say that that's so valuable, because when someone from the outside comes in and relays experience, it's one thing, but there's no way of really knowing what the experience is unless you've gone through it. And I think that's an interesting question that for you, what else can be done to create space for these voices, do you think, right now? Right now in this world where I think these positive messages are so important to hear, and also these first-person stories, these the first-person experience, because it telling somebody's story humanizes it, but when the person themselves is expressing it in a way that's not necessarily literal, it's creative, whether it's a story, a poem, art, I think it's so much more impactful because we all connect with that. And in what ways do you think that can be helped right now?
Yeah, I think we need to purposefully, invest in organizations and in spaces that invite kind of that complexity, right? Invite people to be able to express themselves in ways that feel authentic to them, in ways that, share the fullest range of their experiences. Several folks in the about 10 individuals featured in the book were part of the inaugural class of Narratio Fellows. We launched the program about a year after I came back from Greece, and this was the upstate New York, Syracuse portion. And after coming back from Greece, I thought, okay, well, why not create a specific program that engages with displaced young people beyond just one workshop or 2 workshops or 3 workshops? It was it's a year-long program with a month-long kind of residential component. And what we did that first month, this was July 2019, we had workshops around storytelling for a group of 11 resettled refugee youth from, different parts of the world that were resettled to Syracuse, touching on similar, questions that the Greece portion of things touched on around identity. How do you want to express yourself? How do you want to introduce yourself to the world? But we did that through poetry, we did that through filmmaking, we did that through photography. And by the end of it, by the end of that first month where we were working together, one of our partners was the Ancient Near East Gallery at the Met. And so what we did was each fellow selected an object from the Ancient Near East Gallery and reimagined its label as a poem. But that poem took into account their own personal histories, their own personal journeys and identities. And then by the end of that month-long program, we traveled to New York and they got to perform those poems in the Royal Assyrian Court at the Met, in the Ancient Near East galleries. And I'll never forget the day of the performance and the day before the performance, they got to go into the Met, an hour before it opened and go find the objects they had selected and really, interact with them for the first time. But I'll never forget the day of the performance, we're getting ready and, you've been to the Met, they have these, everything is sectioned off, right? There are areas you can't go into. And they had put out a barrier for the performance space. And one of the fellows had wandered off to go get something. And she came back to trying to get in the space and we're about to start the performance. And, the Met security is serious. I don't have to tell you about museums and security,
Yeah, those museum guards can be very, take their jobs very seriously.
Really seriously.
Yeah.
You really can't trust them. So, one of the guards was, went to the fellow and was like, sorry, you can't, this is special performance happening here. And one of the greatest highlights of my life was just standing there and witnessing the fellow go, yeah, I'm the special performance, and then stepping over the, the little barrier and going and performing her poem. And they've performed their poems at the UN. They had a show at Christie's back in February before the world changed, photography exhibit based around that work. And so really creating spaces where displaced young people can share their own stories on their own terms on the global stage in ways that, showcase them as cultural producers beyond just, folks that have a story that deals with leaving home, just opportunities to extend that narrative and to really engage with it in a way that's 3-dimensional. Because again, refugees are artists, are poets, are so many different things. And that's one thing. And I'll say this, when we talk about that word refugee, and when I introduce myself to people, refugee is always last, former refugee is always last in the line of things. Right. And so I think we have to recognize that it's not the entire story and that there's folks are much more than the tragedies they may have experienced.
Yeah, that's, I think, the message that you're talking about is the one that needs to be amplified for sure. And that kind of thing is it's beautiful. I mean, I think that's what the book is about too, because, when I'm looking at the book, I'm looking at, I'm reading, these poems, and I'm looking at these, beautiful paintings and drawings, and I'm just experiencing it as a piece of art. I'm not thinking about it in a different way. But talking about that, because you're a writer, I mean, just in terms of writing and writing about whether it's your experience or creative writing. I mean, how do you see yourself in that way, and how do you approach your writing? Because you're very good. You've been doing it now for a few years. I don't know what you got your degree in, but I'm assuming it's, what did you get your degree in actually?
Anthropology. That's right there.
Wow, congratulations.
Thank you.
I went to UCLA for 9 months. That's it.
Same thing. I think it's the same thing. Yeah, same exact thing.
Well, that's interesting. So, I mean, but you're writing. I mean, what do you want to write about as you go through life? I mean, is it poetry? Is it narrative? What is it?
Yeah, I think I want to try it all. I think with this book, I wanted to make sure that, I created spaces for other stories to exist, beyond just my own. I was very lucky to be able to have, to share my story with folks around the world very early on in high school and early college, when we met. And this book is really a way of not just, honoring the folks that got me to this point, but everyone whose stories are not heard, because sometimes, it's convenient when there's one person that knows how to share their story, and then that person's given all the opportunities to share that story. I didn't want to be that guy. I wanted to make sure that when I was talking about my stories, or my personal story, that I was actively thinking about the different spaces that story was creating. But moving forward, I think, and this is something that I'm still actively trying to figure out, and there's a long way to go in terms of trying to figure this out. But I don't just want to be the guy that, that is known for being a refugee writer, or, I feel like I have more to give to the world, and whether that's through art, whether that's through poetry, whether that's through stories, I want to be able to do that on the largest, possible way, whether that's through, filmmaking, whether that's through photography, whether that's through different things. And so really, the only thing that I want to do is to continue growing in this way. And I don't want to keep, I don't want to repeat myself with different projects. I want to make sure that each project is pushing further than the one before it. And so now I'm, thinking about the next book, and my dad now is like, what's next? What are we doing? And, so I'm thinking about, okay, well, what's the,
do you get
to
take any time off? Do you get like a few weeks to just chill out?
Hopefully November, late November. That's what I'm shooting for, I think,
because now you have to deal with getting the book out there, right? And putting the word out about the book, and then
exactly. So I think, it's yeah, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, what do you think you got that anthropology degree? What did you take away from that, and why were you interested in that?
Yeah, so during all of this work was happening in the midst of the undergraduate degree, and I wanted to find something that amplified the work, that made it better. And the reason I became an anthropology major was, I was in a lecture sophomore year or freshman year, and the professor, Nancy Worthington, I'll never forget, she said, anthropology is the study of meaning. And as soon as I heard that, I was like, yes, sign me up. That's what I want to talk about. That's what I want to experience and explore. And so as I, through the 4 years, and, a few of my classmates are here with us. And I also just realized the person I was talking about in the camp from upstate New York, that I'm talking to, is also here. So funny. Hi, Meg.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, it's a tiny world. And so really it was just trying to figure out, okay, well, what complements the work, and anthropology was a way of making it deeper. So I would, go to Greece, come back, and I started, it was the summer after my sophomore year that I went to Greece, and I would come back, and then all of my coursework was relevant, because we were talking about storytelling. We were talking about what it means to share a story, and what it means to represent yourself, and then what it means to really examine representation in ways that are meaningful. And this was actually something I wanted to ask you about too. And you've worked with UNHCR now for a few years. You've met refugees, you've have produced videos, you've done so much, and obviously you're accomplished storyteller in your own right. What do you think when we think about stories, when we think about the stories of those that have been displaced, and in your own kind of storytelling practice, when do you know that a story is yours to tell, and then when do you know when to maybe take a step back and still support whoever's going to tell that story, but have a kind of more background role? How have you managed that thus far, both obviously in your career, but maybe in the context of your work with refugees now?
It's interesting when you talk about what anthropology is, and that connection to meaning. For me, it's like it's connection. It's a personal connection to the subject matter. So if I feel personally connected to it, to a story or to a character, something that I recognize in myself, I think that's the key. I think, and I think you're right when you're trying to represent somebody's story. Who's best to tell that story? You're going to be coming at it from your point of view, and I think that to me is like the most important thing, is like finding that personal connection. So whether there's a movie that I'm directing, the first movie I ever directed in 1992-93 was a movie called Reality Bites, and it was written by Helen Childress, who was writing about her experience, and I directed it, but I came in and connected with her and had to figure out my own way into that story. It was her experience, but then we ended up coming up with a character that was sort of from my experience too. And that's how for me it's always been trying to figure out where, how can I connect to this. And I think just what you're talking about with in terms of connectedness, having done some of these trips and had a chance to meet with people who are displaced, it's the commonality. And maybe this is something about, I never studied anthropology, but from a lay person's point of view, and I think anthropology, I think of the study of man, I think of what we all have in common. And the refugee problem is that these are people who are displaced from their homes due to war, conflict, persecution, issues created by man, right, and the countries and borders and people who have to deal with those realities. But underneath it all, we are all people. We're human beings, and that to me is the most important story to tell. And I think that's what makes a story universal. That's what people connect with, is when they see themselves. So, you can see yourself in somebody's story who has a totally different experience, because we share the same human emotions and wants and needs and desire for connection. So I think that's the most important thing, is finding that, because when you find the personal, you find the universal. Hopefully.
Well said. Yeah, I think the universal and then the personal are sometimes, it's, in my experience, the most powerful stories I've heard have been personal, and they've been personal in ways that I could relate to. And that's I think a key thing in the book and key thing in the work, is that it's not just sharing your own perspective, but thinking about different perspectives that your own story can intersect with and open up kind of the opportunity to express through. So yeah, really, really well said. It's not too late to go back to school, Ben, with anthropology. You can get out.
I actually had a dream of being an archaeologist when I was a kid, and I went the wrong way. I went down some other path. But I think what you're doing here, is bringing out the human connection and getting beyond the labels. And I think that's what's, or the preconceptions or the misconceptions. And I think that to me is the most important thing right now when I think about what's going on in the world, is that people are letting go of fear and embracing connectivity and empathy. And we do that by looking at each other and seeing each other as people, not as the other. And you can look at this country and really any country that has welcomed refugees. It's overwhelmingly this positive experience that contributes to the country that is welcoming the refugees in terms of their what they contribute, and in terms of just literally economics and culturally. I mean, that's what America is made up of. It's made up of refugees and immigrants. And I think, there's people might not realize there are over 70 million displaced people in the world right now. And, and of course, these people are trying to figure out a way to survive. And of course, we have I think, an obligation to help each other in that way. But really, this is all about sort of empowering people to have a chance to live their lives, and that's that's a huge thing. So by being open to people and by books like this, you can you are able to really connect on an emotional heart level. And I think that's that what you do, that's so important. So congrats on that.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, and I don't know. I'm happy to keep talking as long as we can keep talking. I see we might need to wrap it up soon, possibly.
Yeah, maybe a couple more minutes, maybe 5 more minutes, and we'll move on to the next segment. This has been lovely. I wanted to ask you too, in terms of the, as you continue your work, as a writer, as a director, as an actor, and then as a Goodwill ambassador for UNHCR, do you see how do you see kind of the film industry adjusting to kind of the refugee narrative, or opening up space for it? Or is that something that's happening? Is that something people are interested in? And critically, not just the refugee story again, but like, ways of thoughtfully engaging with the story that isn't just focused on the tragedy and the victimhood. Do you is that something kind of that you've seen any work towards? Is that something you're working on? I'm curious.
Yeah, I'm definitely personally, having had this experience, wanting to figure out a way to help tell those stories. I think sometimes it's a little bit of a dilemma for someone who, like me, who hasn't had the experience, because I feel like, you're talking about who's best to tell these stories. I could have a desire to tell the story, but I'm probably not going to tell the refugee experience as well as someone who has gone through that. And there are many, I think, voices who are out there who have the stories to tell. But I think supporting those projects, I'm very much it's on my mind, and something I'm trying to do. There are amazing filmmakers and artists out there who are telling great stories. There was Nadine Labaki made this beautiful movie Capernaum, and again, that's about the sort of like the visceral sort of toughest refugee experience that that we might associate with when you think about that type of thing. But I think what you're saying is really important. There are stories that have that are about not just the struggle, but the actual the positive side of what a person can get to after going through these tough experiences. I mean, and so those stories I think are very important to tell. And they're honestly, I think there's more openness to it now, but than there ever was. But it's also, honestly challenging too. And I think that's why it's important to put the positive voices out there that you're doing with this book, and encourage that. But it's interesting, because if you're telling a refugee story, quote unquote, it's probably going to be a story of somebody coming out of struggle and into something else. And once you've gotten through the struggle, then if the story is a story, then it might not be labeled as a story about a refugee, but which is okay too. But I think it's important that people know, like that's another thing. I think that kind of goes unseen, is that these success stories, and like a story like yours, like in your life, you're like you said, refugee is the last thing you use to describe yourself, and that's right. So most people who meet you in your life, if they're not familiar with your work, they're just going to know you as Ahmed, and who graduated from Wesleyan, and is doing this thing, and that's great. But in a way, that's it's the other experience that you've gone through is not, unless it's opened up and people I guess I don't know what I'm trying to say. I guess I'm trying to say that just by your existence of doing what you're doing and living your life, being a refugee, quote unquote, is not something that's going to define you. And I think that's a good thing. But I think it's very important to tell these stories and get the word out there to people that, these are human beings who are not defined by this, and the ones who do need help, who need our support, we need to support. And I think most of all through our attitudes towards each other.
Absolutely.
Anyway, that was a little bit rambling, but you are. I'm very proud of you. I'm very happy for you. Seriously, having known you a short time and what you've done in your young life, it's just it's really beautiful and impressive. And I encourage everybody to get this book, because it's really it's one of those. First of all, it's a great gift for the holidays. It really, right? Like a super positive, beautiful thing to share. And I'm going to be giving them to a lot of friends. And it also, it makes you smile.
Thank you so much, Ben. It's just such an honor to be on this journey with you. And again, the foreword is so beautiful, and I'm just again very, very lucky to have your support as this journey continues. I'm not going to be a young person for long. I gotta leave my
I thought you
behind.
were in college. I don't know what's going on.
But again, this has been lovely. I think just this book is just the beginning. It's out tomorrow everywhere, and it's now I feel like someone likened it to giving birth and having someone else adopt the baby. Now it's out there, and now it's just gonna do its thing.
Now becomes everybody else's. And that's the beautiful thing. It's gonna touch a lot of people.
I really hope so. Again, I'm so honored to be able to bring it to the world, to be able to share it, and I want to make sure that everyone. I know some of the folks that are in there are in the chat, and so I hope that they're proud of it, and I hope that as it travels and as it kind of continues on its own journey, it's called While the Earth Sleeps We Travel, but it's the book itself is hopefully going to travel and do its own thing. As we speak, everyone, the book is being shipped to the people that are in it, in the camps, in the the different countries, and it's been such a pleasure. I hope I was in person, just handing it to folks, but hopefully we'll do that at some point. But thank you so much, Ben. It's been an absolute pleasure. And again, feel free to stick around. We have a very, very special segment coming up. I feel like I'm like introducing a show, like segment coming up before we go to the Q&A.
Show with Ahmed Badr.
Let's do it. And so,
just add anything for your resume. Your already impressive resume. Late night talk show host.
Hey, man, Fallon, man, make it happen. It can happen, I'm ready.
Right out of there.
Absolute pleasure, Ben. Thank you so much. So again, feel free to stick around. I want to introduce this very special next segment. Again, it is a talk show intro, but and I know Sabir is going to join us in a second, but there's a poem that this book ends with. And hi, Drake. How's it going?
Hello to you both. What a beautiful conversation, and thank you for having me.
Of course. Ben meet Drake, Drake meet Ben.
Hello, Ben.
And so the last poem in the book is named Shams, or Sun, and it's written in honor of Alan Kurdi, who passed away tragically in 2015, the young boy who washed up on the shores of Turkey. And this poem that ends the book is in honor of Alan. And I wanted to, before introducing Drake, who has prepared a beautiful, beautiful musical piece also in honor of Alan, I wanted to quickly just read that poem for us as we switch to that segment. And again, this book is itself a celebration. It's a tribute to everyone that's in it. And hopefully an inspiration to create more works like it. So I'm going to read Shams real quick, and then we'll go from there, if that sounds okay.
Good.
Shams, a tribute to Alan Kurdi. We still remember your eyes, how they made the sea tremble, how they reminded us that our mothers held us in the same way, how our fathers' shadows were just as tall. Our ancestors shared the same breath. Remember how the sun hugged our countries? A golden diary for every soul, young and old. Every page a testament to your resilience. We carry your spirit on our growing shoulders. We've learned to keep our memories inside so we can emigrate with our history. After all, our most prized possessions are the ones that can only be taken away by God. The sun now embraces us in a new land. We try to return the embrace, but we hear Aleppo's song in the distance. We hear Baghdad's poetry shake the ocean floor. The cities are impatient for our return. They speak of lost times, desperate journeys, and new worlds. They tell us that they have not forgotten. They tell us that the sun is in our hands and it's our job to return it. We hold it with shaky palms and keep it between our shoulders. When the time comes, the world will be as welcoming as our mother's hands, as tall as the shadows of our fathers, and as eloquent as our ancestors' tongues. The sun will rise tomorrow, and so will your spirit. And in that moment, we will hug you both. So that's sun. And, you know, in writing this poem, I was initially asked to write it to be performed by young people at the camp that I ended up working with. And this was 2 years before the book was even an idea. And, you know, we created the video and you know, it's read by the children in that camp. And now we're just reading it. I haven't read it in a year or so. Just again, remember the importance of honoring and appreciating and appreciating that story and honoring its spirit and its experience. So, you know, with all that said, I do want to turn it over to Drake. So Drake is the founder of the Amazing Vision Collective, which is founded at Juilliard. And they work with refugee communities to really use music as a means of empowerment and collaboration. And so, Drake, you know, I'll hand it over to you, and we can introduce the video. And again, you know, Ben, feel free to stick around. We'd love to have you. And Drake, it's all yours. Tell us about the piece that we're about to hear.
Awesome. Well, thank you again, Ahmed, for having me. The piece you're about to hear is titled Aylan, and it was written by Malad Yusufi, who is actually one of the featured composers who's going to be on our upcoming album of music by composers who have been affected by immigration themselves. And so Malad was born in 1995 during the civil war in Afghanistan. And he's not only a talented composer, but also pianist, conductor, poet, calligrapher, and painter. So he's multi-talented. And I actually commissioned this piece in December 2019 for my graduation recital from Juilliard. When Malad and I first started collaborating on this piece, he immediately suggested dedicating it to Aylan Kurdi, as he had written a melody for Aylan in 2015, but had never put it into any of his works. So with that, this is a piece for cello and piano, and I'm joined by pianist Louise Ortiz. So I hope you enjoy this excerpt.
Thanks, Drake. Thank you so much, Drake, for that. And again, just a small excerpt of a longer piece. It's about six minutes long. And we're going to continue collaborating with Vision Collective. They're going to join us on the virtual book tour, and we'll have different pieces, and we're announcing events with them later this week. So thank you so much, Drake, and thank you, Ben, for joining us. We'll move over to a Q&A soon, just in a couple of seconds. But again, just want to say thank you to Drake, thank you to Ben, thank you to the Strand, thank you to everyone here. Again, this is just an absolute honor to be able to share this work, and having your support really means the world. And I remember just walking into the Strand a few years ago, and just witnessing the majesticness of that place, the majesty of the place. Hi, Sabir. And so it's an honor to be able to do this launch with you, and again, Ben, really grateful for your support, and just feeling gratitude, feeling just so much love all around, and just so much appreciated. I'm excited for this Q&A.
Well, first off, I'd like to thank you for a fascinating conversation, Ahmed, and thank you to Ben for contributing to that fascinating conversation.
I enjoy talking to Ahmed every time, because he's an incredibly interesting and engaged person, and I love what he's doing, and his mission, really to do something to change. I think change people in a good way.
So our first audience question for you, Ahmed, is what individuals have inspired you along your life journey?
My goodness, I think it starts with my parents. I think my parents, just seeing them, just their resilience on display just throughout my life. When we moved to the U.S., when they started from scratch as civil engineers, they were civil engineers for over 20 years in Iraq, and then moved over to the U.S. and starting from scratch, went back to school, got their master's degrees again. So just seeing their resilience, and despite the struggles of not being able to find a job for several years, and having to work at minimum wage jobs to make ends meet. Once you see that, and you see that resilience, you think, I have nothing to worry about. So I'm very, very thankful to them for their inspiration, and they're downstairs watching this, and I hope that they they hear this. You guys are awesome. I love you. I just yell it so they hear it downstairs too. I think
proud of your son. You have a good son. I'm sure they're very.
Miriam says hello, Ben, by the way. Miriam,
it's been a while. Tell her hi.
Yeah, I will.
Yeah, you got a great family. He has a beautiful family.
Thanks, man. Likewise.
Thank you.
And our next audience question is from Sarah, who asks, what's it like releasing a book during a pandemic?
My gosh. And also, Ben, I want to ask you this too, in terms of what's it like working on films during a pandemic too. But I think it's I was really honored that I was able to, and lucky to have had the majority of the field work for the book, be completed, in 2019. And so really the pandemic was a perfect time to finish it. There's not much else happening. I had, this time and space to really engage with the work, and the collection of the work took a year, but then took another year to just figure out the structure and make sure that folks are every piece is kind of represented in a way that makes sense, in a way that is powerful, and in a way that folks can be proud of. So I think the pandemic, obviously, it's been really difficult on so many different folks, but I feel very privileged to be able to be here with my family, and to be able to have been able to finish this. And also major props to Ben for being up to write the foreword in the middle of the pandemic too. I know it's
I think one thing about this situation is I think for a writer, it doesn't really change your life in a way if if you're fortunate enough to be able to support yourself and to be able to have the time to write. It's actually there's space there to do that. And I'm really impressed, Ahmed, too, in terms of you say the organization of the book, because it's the book is it's very well put together, but it's there's an economy to it, and I think as a poet, isn't it about that? Isn't it about figuring out how to tell or communicate what you want to communicate in sort of the most economic way?
Absolutely. And I mean, that was the most difficult part to figure out, because I didn't know whether if I, wanted to even include any of my work throughout or not, because throughout this book, my role within it shifted so much. I'm the editor, I'm the author, I'm kind of the workshop facilitator. And I have a connection. It's not like your typical anthology. I have a connection to every single one of the works represented. And so I hope that, through the structuring of it, where I have, some of my own poems throughout, as kind of a mediating force between all of the different ones, they could still stand on their own and be powerful in their own right. But really, I hope that got across, that it's there to just be a mediating force rather than something that's like front and center and distraction from all of them.
And our next question is from Elizabeth, who asks, are the arts, parenthetical statement, poetry, music, etc., uniquely qualified to represent / help people understand the refugee experience?
Ben, do you want to answer that one through your own kind of artistic and kind of medium, whether it's filmmaking or writing?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that the arts are there to help people understand the human experience, I think, overall. And, that's what art is about. I think it's about us understanding ourselves, understanding each other, trying to make sense of the world, this life that we're in. So as it relates to the refugee experience, it's what I was talking about earlier. It's a connectivity that we all share as people, whatever you want to call yourself. And I think that's the essence of art. It's finding that connection. That's why we can enjoy a piece of music. Anyone in any part of the world can enjoy the same piece of music or a movie. If it's language, maybe is a barrier, but really the visual medium, it's something that just transcends borders. And I think that's what we're getting at, is trying to connect as people without labels. So I think very much so. And I think it's probably the most effective way to really,
Absolutely. And I think the only thing I would add is that, part of this project was offering all these different mediums to people and asking them how they want to represent themselves. So I think the question of why are the arts kind of uniquely qualified to represent can also be answered by those folks that are using them in so many different ways to represent their own stories. Whether it's a drawing, by a 6-year-old, or a poem or a long form story by someone that's much older. The different mediums offer different things to different people. And, a 6-7-year-old might not know how to write their story, but they know how to draw what they want to be when they grow up. That was one of the exercises. And, several folks drew, hospitals and kind of a doctor's gown and all these incredible dreams. One of the most powerful pieces in the book is by Mara. Mara I met again north of Greece. And we were doing a workshop around just your own personal dreams. And it was literally a piece of paper with a box that said dreams at the top. And then you drew whatever you want to draw inside of it. And, Mara just drew a doctor. And then one thing that was also just heartbreaking was I asked her to write her name at the bottom, but she hadn't learned really how to write, or her age as well. Number 8, she was 8 years old. And I wrote the number 8 and I thought, okay, well, you try it. And so that trial and error, is included in the book, is that one sheet where she writes the number 8 for the first time, and then where she's from. And so it's those types of expressions that are so powerful, but you have to invite the individual to express themselves in whatever way they feel is best.
Also, I would even say, I'm sitting here with the book, and I keep showing the book. I want people to see it. But that cover art is right. That's off of one of the walls in Greece, at one of the at the camp that you're at, or the settlement area. Yeah,
Exactly.
and there's something really, beautifully human about these handprints. Because a handprint is a handprint. I guess it's like we're all people.
Absolutely. And I think, as we wrap up, I think the quick story with that wall is that the camp that I worked in Greece used to be an Air Force base, and there was this one building in it that everyone lived in when the camp was first created. Hundreds of people, just kind of squeezed in there with like 3 bathrooms. It was just horrible. And then once more formal settlements were built, that building was abandoned, and kids would go in and paint and graffiti the walls. And so the cover of the book is one of those walls. And I saw so many of those different handprints, and it was just such a powerful and poignant kind of expression of presence, right? The folks that had that are different places, and then just to be able to honor that and capture that in that photo, which became the cover, was an absolute pleasure. And I hope that it all brings it together.
Unfortunately, we are now out of time for questions. So thank you, everyone, for joining us. Ahmed, do you have any final remarks or any final thank yous before we wrap up?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think, thank you, Ben, of course, just for being part of this journey with me, ever since the last few years. And I'm just really, really looking forward to all that, happens next. And I'm very grateful to you, Sabir, in the Strand. I want to thank my publisher, Andrews McMeel, the wonderful editor, Melissa Rhodes, Kat Vaughn, who's been an amazing publicist. So many different people. They're all in the acknowledgements. You can find your name in the acknowledgements of the book. But yeah, so many amazing humans to thank. Again, thank you to my parents. Thank you to my family back home in Iraq. Thank you to my dear friends throughout college that helped make this a reality. And then for just, being so supportive throughout all of the craziness. Yeah, this is my Oscar speech, Ben. I don't know. I think I'm forgetting someone. But yeah, just very, very grateful to everyone who made this a reality.
I think I'm very, very happy for you. And this is truly a beautiful achievement. And the first of many, I know that you're going to be giving us a lot more in years to come. So I'm happy to support you in what you're doing.
Thank you so much, Ben.
I'm happy to be able to say the Strand hosted you back when.
Exactly.
And on that note, thank you everyone for joining us. If you haven't already picked up your copy of Ahmed's book, I have dropped the link in the chat. So thank you everyone, and have a good night.
Thanks, guys.